Hey, nerds. Welcome to another edition of the Marketing Nerds Podcast. My name is Brian. Now, many of you probably already know that I am an active member of the American Marketing Association right here in Boston, the Boston chapter. And this week, they had a panel of marketers talking about how to grow your podcast. Now, this is coming from a marketer's perspective. A bunch of panelists, cool guests, Bob Cargill, who is a local Suffolk University marketing professor, well known in the marketing community. David Meerman Scott was there as well. You probably know him as the author of the New Rules of Marketing and PR, Fanocracy, all these New York Times best-selling books, and he's a famous speaker. He was there as well. So I took my tripod, I took my cell phone, stuck it up on that tripod, and just recorded everything that they had to say live. Now, this is as authentic as it gets. It's not edited. It's not fancy. The audio is not that great, but there's some chapters down below in the description. If you want to jump ahead to some of the gems that were being spoken about, go ahead, or just sit back, relax, and watch this event at the Podcast Garage in Allston, Massachusetts, as we listen to these four superpower podcasters talking about growing your podcast from a marketer's perspective.
So thanks for coming. As you know, Amy Boston, we do events every month. We do an educational event. We do a marketing bingo. We just started a career panel. We're doing our first panel on October 16th at Boston Public Library for you folks that are looking to
5 years. The energy in this garage is fantastic. Thank you for having us at PRX Garage Podcast Studio for a night powered by creativity, bold ideas, and American Marketing Association Boston. Tonight is all about amplifying voices, whether that's your personal brand, your company's mission, or just a passion project that you want to share with the world. Podcasting is a microphone waiting for your story. We are not holding back today. Actionable tips, real talk about starting from scratch, and secrets to crafting a perfect podcast that not only reaches the listeners but truly connects with them. Let's get right into the things. I am Chetna, the host of AMA Boston's Talking Marketing podcast, and I'll be your moderator tonight. We are joined by some incredible guests, and so let's introduce our stellar panel. First, we have David Meerman Scott. David is a business growth strategist and international best-selling author of 13 books, including Fanocracy and the New Rules of Marketing and PR. His books are published in 30 languages from Arabic to Vietnamese and have sold nearly 1 million copies. David's expertise includes how to align marketing with the ways that people buy and how to grow fans of any business. He is a passionate live music fan, obsessed by the Apollo lunar program, and loves to hike, surf, and dance to the Lindy Hop. David, thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Trisha Rose. After spending nearly 15 years with some of the America's top business institutions, including Fidelity Investments and Harvard Business School, Trisha Rose made a dramatic shift and enrolled in the School of Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. This bold move led to a decade of visual artists until 2008 market crash forced another pivot. She created an award-winning one-woman show, How to Draw a Naked Man, about her transformation from executive to artist, and her storytelling career took off right after performing The Moth. Trisha combines her corporate background
strategies I was using for this big company, Fortune 500 company, were a little too radical for them, but that was the best career move I ever made, was to get fired. So I started out my own, wrote a couple of books, and then one came out in 2007 called The New Rules of Marketing and PR. For some reason, that one hit. Sure. So I don't have my own podcast. So I represent guests on podcasts, which I have done over 500 times. And so to launch Fanocracy, which came out in the worst month in the history of the universe, which was January 2020. You know what happened? A little thing called COVID. So when you have 25 speeches lined up for the next couple of months, that's not a great time. But Fanocracy coming out in January 2020, what I did was lined up over the year leading up to that 150 podcasts that I was a guest on. And it was all podcasters from all over the world. And that I recorded those podcasts in this roughly 6 months leading up to the book launch. And fortunately, all but a very small handful of the hosts agreed to hold the episode until the week of the launch of the book. So the actual publication date was January 7th, 2020. And that week, about 150 podcast episodes dropped. And some big ones, Tony Robbins' podcast and some other, big podcasts and lots of ones that have smaller but passionate listeners. And as a result, this new concept that I named Fanocracy, a made-up word, I bought the URL, which no one had ever heard of before. I was able to get that into the lexicon and get people thinking about it. And the result was that we sold just under 10,000 books in a week, which is enough to make the Wall Street Journal bestseller list. So the idea that podcasting was the launch of this book that I had poured my thoughts into that I had written over the last couple of years, and that I was, this idea of fandom that I'm still obsessed over. The podcasting really, really, really did help to launch that book. And again, it wasn't my podcast because I don't have one, but it was all of you who are podcasters or aspiring podcasters to help to make that book have a great launch.
Bob, what is one way your podcast... I'm sorry, I did not mean to startle you.
Get Bob sitting back to relax. I did jump up, didn't I? I'm up. My turn.
What is one way your podcast has helped build trust with your audience in ways other marketing channels couldn't?
Yeah, trust is so important in marketing and business and life itself. And there are many ways we can earn trust, but podcasting, for people to hear your voice, there's a tone to your voice, there's things that you say on a regular basis, they get to know you, and there's a term, parasocial relationships, they feel, even if they haven't met you in person, that they know you, and the more they hear from you on a consistent basis, on being authentic, I know that's cliche, and transparent, another cliche, but meaning sharing your feelings, not just facts and news, but opinions and your perspectives, you're teaching, you're helping, you're being generous. So I could go on. It's not a one-shot deal. A lot of people I've seen with podcasting, with social media, in general, they expect overnight success. That isn't the way it works. Just like in life, relationships take time. As David himself mentioned, the blogging, the same kind of thing. 2004, both he and I started. His blog skyrocketed. His book sold millions. I do have a book, and it's been a long, strange career. That's part of the title. And starting with
from the Grateful Dead, by the way.
He's a great. Not that I didn't know that. I hope they won't come after me.
No, you're good. You're good.
He's a big Grateful Dead fan, and I've seen them how many times?
111 times.
That is crazy. That is insane.
Another book I wrote, Marketing Lessons from the Grateful Dead, with Brian Halligan, the co-founder and former CEO of HubSpot, who's a great friend of mine, and Bill Walton, the NBA basketball player who is not only 7 feet tall, Dane passed away sadly last year, not only 7 feet tall, but has seen the Grateful Dead 850 times.
Oh my word.
Wow. See, we don't fool around at AMA, boss. With our guests on these podcasting panels and everywhere else.
But you're cool to use long, strange trip.
It felt it felt right, because it has been long and strange and different, and I thought, yeah, I'd co-opt that phrase a little bit, and like David and our other panelists, you know, marketing is, like I say, there's jingles, there's headlines, there's bells and whistles, smoke and mirrors, baby, but it comes down to relationships, and this guy over here said recently, very recently, 95%, this is what he said, and Brian, I told my class this today, 95% of marketing, according to Brian, is the human connection. Am I right? Relationship. That's you know, being hyperbolic, if that's the right word. That may be a little bit of a stretch, but I believe that. Whether that's the number or not, it's the human to human relationship that we have. And you know, we can have AI, we can have podcasts, we have blogs, everything you name in terms of a platform. But look at, again, David said so eloquently, you know, that's where I've been, this is where I'm going, human relationships. So podcasting can help you do that. I mean, you can't always be there in person like this. And so podcasting, get that voice out there, get your opinions out there. It's not that hard. It's just showing up and doing it on a regular basis. And I started, you know, from scratch and still am very, I'm a bootstrapper, if you will. I don't have a big budget, no fancy equipment. Anyone can do it. I encourage you to do it if you haven't already started doing it. Hope I answered your question, Chetna.
You did. That actually reminded me of my relationship with you. So I was a student at Suffolk University, and I saw one day on my LinkedIn his post, and someone had reposted. And I started following him almost religiously, checking out his Instagram, checking out his LinkedIn. I'm not on Facebook, but I guess you are on Facebook too.
Everywhere.
And then you are everywhere. And then all of his posts, and sometimes he would talk about encouraging if podcasting still feels out of reach.
So I've been teaching storytelling now for, I guess, a decade. I started telling stories in 2010 with the Moth down in at a story slam at the bitter end in New York, which ranks as one of the highlights of my life. It was one of the scariest things I ever did and was a ton of fun. And so mostly when I'm teaching a story, if somebody said, I don't have a story to tell, what that means is they don't think they have some dramatic life and death story to tell. And most of us don't have dramatic life and death. Most of us are just regular people, you know, leading our lives. And everybody, I mean, if you got up this morning, you have a story to tell, it's just, do you know how to craft it? And so what I help people do is really mine for stories that matter to them. If it doesn't matter to you, it's not going to matter to anybody else. And so I help somebody, I was teaching one woman, and she was about how to tell a story, and she was gay, and she was in recovery, and she's telling me the story, and I'm like, it just doesn't seem like this is interesting to you, like your own story is not interesting to you. And she's like, well, I thought I was supposed to tell it because I'm gay and in recovery. I'm like, no, you keep saying that your mother put you on a diet when you were in the 3rd grade. She was like, that's it. So, I mean, and that mattered to her, and it suddenly turned into a great story, right, that could help a lot of people. And so I help people mine for the stories that matter to them, that are going to matter to their audiences, and then give them a framework to tell that story. I won't put you through a storytelling workshop right now, but it's like theme, stakes, and narrative arc are really the 3 things you want to think about when you're crafting a story. And if you have a structure, then that builds up your confidence, and you feel, you know, you have parameters of what is going to drive your story forward. And so I like to take people through that storytelling workshop. The other thing is, so I was raised never to draw attention to myself, which clearly backfired somewhere along the way. But I would, even when I had a bunch of success with this one-woman show I did, and I had a story on the Moth Radio Hour called How to Draw a Naked Man, which, you know, 250,000 people downloaded the podcast. And, you know, I'm a pretty good storyteller, but really what was important about that story was encouraging people to step into their creative self. That's what made that story take off. But, you know, I was still very nervous because it's a first-person narrative story. You were talking about yourself. And it was like, I was having this like cognitive like freak out, I'm not supposed to be doing this. And then a woman named Marion Roach Smith, who's a wonderful memoir writer, said, you know, basically, and I should know this from teaching stories, it's about the message that you happen to be illustrating. So it's a larger theme about resilience or generosity or the relationship with your mother. You just happen to be the illustration. And so that universal theme can reach a whole lot of people. You nudge yourself off stage, right? So it's not about you, it's about this larger message. And that helps people get less freaked out, you know, that it's not all about them, that it's about the message. And yeah, so that's, you know, and frankly, just so you know, I mean, I started my podcast because I live in the woods in New Hampshire and didn't have anyone to talk to. You know, so there's all kinds of, and and now I have a podcast around talking with artists, but it was conversations I wanted to have. And apparently other people want to listen into those conversations. So it's something that mattered to me, and so it's mattering to other people. Does that answer the question?
It does, and I believe what you said in the last line is what matters to us also matters to the others. We just have to figure out a way to transport our story to them, because they might be living the same life as us, because after all, we are all regular people with everyday life happening to us. Like, nothing is spectacular in the small details. It's when you combine the whole larger image and then you see, oh my God, I did that. That's spectacular.
Absolutely. And I mean, and one of the things that we like to talk about when we're telling storytelling is that I may not understand the situation that you're in, but I understand the feelings you're having in that situation. And that's where your common ground happens is, you know, I have never been, there's a great story by Tim Manley, who was the, you know.
Yeah, and I mean, storytelling, sure, that's what it's about. Delivering your company's messages or your personal messages, not so much. And so, you know, always thinking of how a story comes into it is really important. And I think, you know, talking about looking for stories and mining stories, often companies say, well, we don't really have stories in here. Like, well, I want to talk to your chief designer, or I want to talk to someone in customer service support, or I really want to go and talk to someone who is a salesperson in Dubuque, and then ask them some probing questions. There's always stories. Mm-hmm. And it's just a matter of pulling them out of people. And the best, like I said, I don't have my own podcast. I've been on like 500 or so other podcasts, and the best hosts are those that can bring those stories out. And then those are the ones, oh, like, this is a great host. This is something different here, and then I'll check out their podcast and maybe then subscribe to it, because they're able to bring out stories from anyone who's on the other side of the microphone or the other side of the Zoom or whatever, however it's being recorded.
And one thing I'll just add to that too, there's a data that is wrapped in a story is 22 times more memorable. So, you know, we all have to get facts across somehow or another, but if it's wrapped in a story, it's gonna be way more compelling and engaging for your audience to remember that.
Talking about engaging and compelling narratives, Alan, what's the boldest episode you have ever created, and what made it resonate with the listeners?
That's a really fun question. I've been thinking about it a lot on the right here, actually. Bold means a lot of things for me. I think, like on the TV podcast, the boldest things I did were, as you mentioned earlier, shooting for the moon. So my friend and I were covering, my co-host and I were covering this 90s series called Twin Peaks. And incredible classic series, a lot of us are familiar with it, great series. And we reached a point while covering it, I think in season 2 or something, and I said, we got to do something. Like, we can't just cover Twin Peaks, we have to do something else. And we looked into who was writing about the series, because it's a very thought-provoking series. And there was this woman, Courtney Stallings, and she wrote a best-selling book that is from the perspective of women resonating with the main character. One of the main characters, Laura Palmer. A beautiful book that was like climbing the charts. And we're just two guys on like a Skype call, and I was like, what if we just emailed her and said, will you be on an episode with us? And we got an hour and a half out of this like best-selling writer, because we're not gonna get, rest in peace David Lynch, the creator of that show, but just going for like, what is the biggest guest I can go for, and what's the worst they're gonna do? Say no. And she said,
Did you try for David Lynch?
At the time I did not. I mean, he was...
Because you should. I mean,
I wish I had.
I was going to say yes to something.
No, absolutely. I was very, very sad when he passed, because I do think there's a world where I could have talked to him. Very interesting person, but Courtney was easily the biggest guest we had at the time, and we got a lot of people that, like, when you do something that out there for yourself, people start to see you differently, and they say, wow, you're the person who can get this guest, and suddenly not your clout, but your reputation jumps significantly. We went from just some kids to the people who can get a best-selling author on their show overnight. So it's stuff like that I think you can, within podcasts, like, just challenge yourself and scare yourself a lot, and that'll make really, really, really cool episodes. I think that's the biggest one for me.
I would just echo that from the other side, because I've had people come up to me and say, I've got a podcast. I'll be on it. What? You'll be on it? Because I love being a guest on podcasts. It's great. I don't have to do any work other than chat. I just tell stories or answer questions, whatever it is. And so aim high. You never know who will say yes.
People love talking about themselves.
I punch way.
I'm an expert at talking about myself.
And I punch way above my weight for the guests that I get on the show, because once you get one guest, then they're like, oh, you've had that. Well, then I'll go, and then it just snowballs. And so just ask whoever you want to be on your show.
Talking about the flip side, David, were you at a place where the person who asked you if you would want to be on my podcast and you said yes, and they responded like absolutely surprised?
Not really, because it's almost always by email. And a few people might say that, but most people are like, oh, great, when would you like to do it? And I'm like, I don't know, when do you want to do it? It's all cool, we'll figure it out. Even if you don't have a podcast that has had 8 guests, or you don't have a podcast that has, lots and lots of listeners, just go for it and see what happens. The only exceptions I personally make are brand new podcasts. And here's what I say to brand new podcasters, like, hey, I just started this podcast. It's about marketing, and I want to have you on. And I'm like, who are you? No. I say that's awesome. I can't wait to be on. When you reach your first anniversary, if you're still going strong,
Yes.
please reach
Yes.
out to me.
Yes.
Because I don't know if any of you guys might know, but I don't know what the stats are, but the vast majority of podcasts
4%.
do not continue.
There's 4% that are actively. I just did some research on this. There's like, out of a 4 million podcasts, there's like 4% that are constantly,
Keep doing
continually
it. Yeah.
producing content.
And so I have done this before and regretted it, spending the hour of my time where, I just started a podcast and I want you to be my first guest, and I'll say yes. And then there's 6 episodes in and they cancel.
Yep.
They don't do it anymore. They stop.
That's the same as so many other social media channels,
Right.
blogs, especially
YouTube
podcasts
channels.
that people start and stop. And I mentioned consistency and
And-
longevity. That's how you build
And
trust.
so the way I do it is just say, great, love to be on it. As soon as you have your first anniversary, I'm your guest of season 2.
And I don't know if I'm allowed to keep going here, but when when I started my podcast, literally, I had been kicking an idea around from 2016, and then 2022 rolled around, and the Moth called and said, we want to air one of your stories in 3 months. I said, that's great. Would you mind at the end of that bio saying Trisha Rose is the host of the popular new podcast, No Time to Be Timid? And they said, sure. I did not own a microphone. I had absolutely.
What storytelling elements do you consider essential for making each episode memorable, each podcast episode memorable?
I really like to focus on answering the question that's presented to me and then pivoting to something else, which I maybe have noticed that I've been doing here. So, I was talking about stories. I've got a bunch of stories in the story bank that I know work. And so I'm constantly thinking, okay, how can I pivot to a story that works? Question, answer, question, answer, question, answer, which gets boring. The best episodes, the best conversations are ones that are just that, conversations. Like, wow, that was fun. Right, the hour's up, can you keep going? Sure, I'll keep going. Let's do it.
Like talk show hosts late at night, like Jimmy Kimmel coming back tonight. They sit on one side of the desk and their guests sit on the other, or side by side, and you do feel like eavesdropping. You feel like they're in their living room. I grew up listening to Johnny Carson, way back.
Carson's
One of the greatest, and again, now we have Jimmy Kimmel, Jimmy Fallon, and a bunch of other names up there.
And Bob Carter.
This panel is illustrious in terms of, you want a podcast panel, you get a bunch of people who are good at speaking, right? Yeah. Great at speaking.
Talking about great at speaking, Bob, what grassroots creative techniques have helped build a loyal audience from scratch?
Well, again, I have to repeat consistency and being yourself. It's so important. Storytelling has been mentioned, and you have to believe in yourself that you do have a story to tell. I don't just do interviews. I have 203 episodes now. I think only about a third of them are conversations with others, which I love doing. But frankly, I find them more work because you have to line up people and the logistics. I've done some in person. I think that's quite creative at different places, even just using my phone. I use Podbean. It's an app.
By the way, this would be a great spot right here.
Well, this would make sense, yeah. The podcast garage, yes. So I don't have a professional studio like here.
Yes, you do, right here.
I gotta talk to someone, right?
Yeah.
Hook me up.
It's $1 a minute, I asked.
But, yeah, I did see
Right?
that,
You
yeah.
just do an hour podcast.
Guess what
Do
it
an
costs
hour
my
podcast
home
for $60.
office.
And
Zero
parking.
I was gonna say yes.
Right there.
I did park front row. That was pretty good.
I'm a fan of the PRX podcast. Garage.
To answer, try to think what your question was about being creative and connecting with the audience and I was saying, I do a lot of like keynote talks. I do a lot of monologues. I've come, even at this age, so far. What I mean is, like you think you've learned everything there is to learn, but that's not true at all. Podcasting, just like blogging, has taught me, how to put myself out there, how to tell a story, how to believe that I can get behind a microphone and talk for 60 minutes straight, which is crazy. I teach now at all these different schools, and I'm very accustomed, right, Sharon, to talking for an hour or two straight. But podcasting, anybody, you put yourself out there, it's like, what do they call it, a high wire without a safety net below. It's a great lesson. It's a great leap of faith.
Tightrope?
Tightrope? Yeah.
So what did I say?
Like a high wire, yeah.
I said high wire, tightrope, yeah. You've got to believe and not be afraid of falling, and maybe don't look down, and just go for it. And I, again, have learned about myself. I've learned about others, the people I've interviewed. There's like half a dozen in this room, Christina and Brian and maybe David is next. Alan's interviewed me. Jeff, I've interviewed you. Peter, I've interviewed you. You meet people. You get so close to them, and that's the human relationship part. And they won't forget it, and you get to know them so much better. And then you hope, you have a lot of listeners who also feel the same. They learn, they get inspired, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, so. Yeah.
I think this question would be great if Trisha and Alan, you both also answer. Like, what are some techniques to build an audience and to have the conversation keep going and past the 1 year anniversary?
Okay. I try to make sure that every episode, it matters. I keep saying that, but if I know that what my audience is trying to be is they're either aspiring artists and entrepreneurs or practicing artists and entrepreneurs. So I want to present people who have done things that will inspire my listeners. And what I do is I reach out to people that I want to talk to, like a person who I've seen and I want to emulate what they've done, or they can somehow speak to the whose idea was this? And I got an email from a woman who is from South Africa living in Spain and cited a specific episode that said, this episode changed my life. I'm now doing all of these things because she was a mother with 2 kids and she didn't know how to put time aside for herself. And I had a guest who was a creative person with 2 kids and was saying, this is how I do it. And so she's now like written a children's book and she's done all that. I mean, it was unbelievable. And so you just kind of don't know the impact you're going to have. And so the way, I'm building my audience slowly because it's sort of like one aspiring artist at a time. But if I get an email from somebody like that, then for every person who reaches out to me, there's a bunch that have not, right? And so I think, the way I try to build my audience is just do really good work, and word of mouth spreads. I mean, is that a...
That answers the question, and I do believe sometimes there are positions in life where we lose track of why we are doing it, why we started it. I believe I have that moment a lot of times and I'm just starting. But yeah, to just even one story, even one person coming up to say and that they are now doing so and so thing because we inspired them. Mm-hmm. That's enough for us to keep going, and that's enough for them to keep going. Yeah. It's a win-win situation. There's a lot of positivity in our work that we keep on continuing. So
yeah, I actually think a big part of getting that audience and getting them to stick around is developing your self-confidence and telling yourself over and over, this is a good thing I'm doing, and people want to listen to it. Because that natural charisma radiates, and that's my sort of tangible advice, right? My intangible advice for building that community is just, as you get to do a podcast for a long time, especially a conversational one, I think you get this ability to sort of realize, I just did something, this was a really good one. On average, I'm proud of what I do, and I'm making good conversations, and I'm consistent. These are all very important things we're talking about. But every once in a while, even on a random weekly discussion podcast, you'll go, oh, I actually had some really great points there. I'm really proud of that one. And that encourages you to promote yourself more, and then you get the comments back that say things like, you inspired me, or you sparked a new thought in my head. I was just telling a very good friend of mine last night, on a random episode talking about a 90s drama, I was like, oh, I brought up this point about art that I never would have had a platform to deliver if it wasn't for, just developing this consistency and talking over and over again.
And I want to say something, Bob, I'm going to say this too. I am way better at what I do outside of my podcast because I started a podcast. It just hones some skills. I ask better questions. I'm more curious. I don't know what it is. I just feel way more sturdier in myself, which I think happened because I've been producing this podcast. I mean, it's weird.
I say that to employers. I say that to people I used to manage. I say that to students. Any form of social media, you do it on a regular basis, you become better at using what you do, your day job, and communicating with others. So employers and fans should see that in the people that host podcasts, that are guests on podcasts, and that have blogs, and that are on X or Instagram or wherever. If you're there frequently, it's work. And you're learning, and you're extending yourself, and it's stamina and energy, and you become better. Yeah. I believe that. I hope, we just hope the fanocracy, the fans out there notice that.
I'm going to add 3 practical tips on growing an audience. The first one is a podcast is long form, half an hour, depending on how long your podcast is. So repurposing. Amazing, turning it into, and most podcasters do this, but it's not just audio. You can do video, you can stick it up on YouTube. So that's a way of repurposing. You can turn it into short form content. It can become 1-minute clips, 30-second clips. It can go on social media that way. It can become a transcript, and almost everyone does that, but that transcript can then be used in multiple ways. So number one, repurposing, a great way to generate attention for your podcast. The second one is make sure that the guest has, and I'm again speaking from the perspective of the guest, has a ton of resources that they can share. The best podcasters will after the episode has been produced and right around the time that it airs, maybe a little before, a little after, whatever, they'll send links to the guest and ready to promote links and ready to promote social media posts and I don't know what they're called. Maybe you guys do the visual, the
Audiogram?
image. Yeah, there's and you can have a picture of the host and the guest together with the name of the podcast, like and in different formats. The right shape for LinkedIn, the right shape for Twitter, the right shape for Instagram. And all of those assets delivered to make it super easy for the guest to just, oh shoot, okay, I'll stick that on my Twitter, I'll stick that on my LinkedIn. Because you get especially if you get a guest who's well known, like you guys have had, and all of a sudden they're, 1 million followers, push it out there, that helps to build an audience. Third idea, a little bit radical. So we all know that search is being disrupted by AI, and if someone in the past pre-ChatGPT wanted to find an answer, they would go to Google, they would type in a query, and they would get answers. Some of them might be podcasts that provide those answers. Now people do the same query, ChatGPT, whichever one they use, and they're getting a couple of paragraph answers. However, many of those AI tools are now doing hybrid, so Perplexity is a great example of that, but Google's now doing it as well, where the LLMs, the large language models, were all trained with data that's 2 or 3 years old. So what happens if it's something that's more recent, breaking news? What happens if it's an episode of a TV show that came out last year rather than 3 years ago when it was indexed by the large language models? So it's the idea of combining what I call newsjacking, concept I pioneered a couple years ago, with your podcast episodes. Maybe even if you have a hot episode of then pushing out a press release around that episode, and it doesn't even have to be current, it doesn't have to be your current episodes. Like imagine you had a guest on, and all of a sudden that guest has done something that gets them in the news. Well, hey, here's an interview with this guest, and you push that out on a press release linking back to the episode, and all of a sudden you can be literally the #1 hit on these hybrid search engines that need content for the things that have not been indexed by the large language models because they're current. And so I'm seeing really clever people now figure out ways to get found in the hybrid search engines, partly generated through the artificial intelligence around large language models, and then for the older content, and then partly around what's new, what's interesting, what's happening now. And it turns out that a lot of that is this kind of content.
David, you just wrote a great article about that and posted it on LinkedIn and Star, I think. And I shared it with my
I think it was like 2 weeks ago or something.
Yeah, it was great. It was awesome. And we were also talking on the hall, coincidentally, about, we've been around the block, I'll speak for myself, a few times. We've seen the internet come around, we saw social media come around, AI. You need to leverage it, you need to embrace it, you need to partner with it. And everyone's saying, oh, what about SEO, what about search engines? And David just gave you his secret, the secret sauce. I don't think it is that radical.
And not that many people are talking about this right now. I mean, everyone knows that the AI engine, large language models, ChatGPT, whatever, is disrupting search. We all know that. And those of you who work with companies or have your own agencies or whatever, you know that you're getting a lot less traffic than you had even a year ago. However, there's ways around that, and it's all about real time now, newsjacking, instant.
It's everything he said in his book, like you said a couple of years ago, 25 years ago, you were first on the scene with the newsjacking thing and content marketing and the social media. The more content you put out there, and that's why I believe so much in longevity and being consistent. The technology might change, but if you can create content, and that's what a podcast is.
It is great content that can be repurposed in so many ways. And then, wait, there's all of a sudden there's this story about a particular TV show. It's really big now. They're gonna do a reboot of Twin Peaks, right?
Yeah.
Oh crap! I've got like all these episodes about Twin Peaks. Bang them out now,
Yeah.
because that might get you attention.
And I think that's the other, we talk about consistency a lot here because it does matter, and that's one of the other great things about it, is when you have a bigger backlog, all that stuff stays, right? This is a permanent medium, so we have had shows that we banked during the pandemic because we weren't recording for a while, that months, maybe even years later when we finally put everything on YouTube, people are like, oh, I didn't know you guys did this. And it's like, yeah, it's all there. So often it's hard when you do a medium like this, that for our case that releases weekly, you say to yourself, well, this isn't gonna hit in week 1. That's the only time it matters, it's first 48 or first week. And it's like, no, actually maybe some random person's gonna find this in 3 years because they're Googling the show you covered like 5 years ago. And it's good to have that library so that they can find it all.
That's how you get found on Google, and we're all giving you different ways. It's a soup, really. You mix it up and put, with all these different ingredients, and you got a great success story written about blogs, about podcasts. I was thinking AMA Boston, clients, myself. We look under the hood, if you will, at the Google results, and you will often see content written 3, 4, 5, maybe even 10 years ago. If it was, something that stuck, something that resonated, or as David was saying, something that comes back into the news. So just creating content, it's great marketing.
One of the things I struggle with as a podcaster is, there's all this energy that goes to making the podcast, and then there's a whole other set of energy that goes to marketing the podcast. And it can...
Marketing. Radical.
Oh, yeah.
We should get some experts about marketing.
I know, and it made me kind of want to try to daytime drink when I have to do both at the same time. So what I try to do a lot of is create that content, so then I can really focus on the marketing of it. Not try to do both of those things at the same time when I can, because it's hard for me. Maybe other people can do it easily. It is hard for me to have both those hats on, of making and marketing at the same time. So if I can, before I start a season, have as many made before that season launches, then it gives me the ability to take advantage of things and be more agile as a marketer. Because instead of me going, I haven't even done the interview yet. That's not an ideal place to be. So
That is true. That is actually true. With all the things and all the topics, and when you are actually down to doing the podcast, and then you struggle to go through it, and then you look back and you're like, what happened? What happened right now?
yeah.
I did all the work, where's the results?
Yeah.
That's the part where people listen to it.
Talking about ingredients, and now we have instruments. Alan, for those who are just starting out, what's one piece of gear or software that made the big...
I think a well-maintained calendar and putting podcast, either recording and or editing on there is the tip to getting really good at it. Not just getting a good mic or a good studio with good soundproofing. I think that's all going to come as it does, but starting with a pattern is the most important thing.
I think I'm going to mention this in my calendar to make a calendar.
Nice.
But I'm getting the hint, consistency is a big thing over here.
Oh, absolutely. Plus it just messes with your head if you're not doing it. You just have to anchor it. My show goes out Thursday at 12:01. That's when it lands. And if anything happens, that's just what's going to happen. It's going to land at 12:01. And then that just makes the listeners expect it. Because if you start messing with the listeners, they're like, wait, isn't it supposed to happen today? What's happening? And then you'll lose them.
Thank God we have ourselves to rely on and not the ATS.
Pardon me?
the ATS, which monitors all the air traffic.
Yeah.
Thank God
Yeah.
you don't have that to rely on.
Yeah, absolutely.
If I delay, I'm at the point with my listeners now where if we delay by 2 hours, they're like, it's like the morning paper. They're like, where's the chat?
What's happening? Yeah.
Sunday at 9, not Sunday at 9:30. I'm like, I didn't finish editing.
But I also, I don't have a professional studio. I have a nice microphone, and I have blankets that it works. I have an amazing producer, let me say that. I would never try, my zone of genius is not cutting tape. I'm good at conducting the interviews. And that's another thing to figure out. What are you good at, and what do you need to just send to somebody else to do? And I sent that to somebody else to do. And we work really well together, and he knows my voice, and we edit really well together. But, I had to be really careful about, okay, I'm good at this, I'm not good at that. So I really focus on making those interviews as sharp as they can be.
Trisha, continuing with you, what has been your most effective DIY workflow for storytelling or editing, and how did you discover it?
I think what I try to do before every season is know what the theme of that season is. So that makes it efficient, because I know the theme of my season is going to be X. Like the first season I ever did, I wrote the No Time to Be manifesto, of which I have copies for everyone if you would like. But so I knew what every episode was going to be, and so it was I could schedule my time and be efficient that way. And so every season has a theme, every episode has a theme, and so I'm not running around trying to figure out what I'm like. When I start out that season, it already begins with a sense of efficiency, because I know what I'm trying to do. I have a narrative arc that I'm trying to create. And so I'm not getting lost. So I know whether a guest is right or not. So I know whether these questions are the ones I want to ask. So that's part of what I do to make the workflow stream, because chit chat before the thing begins, just to kind of, brush the dust off or whatever. But part of what makes I do way less editing now than I did in the beginning, because I'm just a better interviewer, because I prep way ahead of time, and I work really hard, so the questions I ask get the guest excited, and they give me stuff that I can just let them go, and then as David said, I just riff off of that, right? And it's efficient, because you don't have to edit so much at the end, a bunch of stuff that isn't good. Does that?
Yeah, it does. And it reminds me, Alan, that you said something similar to me when I was starting out. I started as the host for Talking Marketing in June, right after Alan left. And the first piece of advice Alan gave to me was, if you research it well, if you know it by the back of your hand, you would not have a lot to edit with, and you would have a clean episode.
Yep.
And I believe, Alan, you would like to add something to that.
Yeah, I was just thinking, so pre-production and post-production you can make magic out of almost anything, right? Pre-production especially. I don't have the time or energy to do as much research as I would like to, but I think it's super valuable. But even just saying like, well, we're gonna spend the next year talking about this show. Who are some guests we wanna have on? What are some big ideas? What are the episodes that I know are gonna be really high traffic, and what can we do to promote those? You're doing all of that before you ever hit the red button, right? Then you have production, you're making the episode. You already have your outline, you know what we're going to talk about. We have a format, we have an intro, we have an outro. We keep a really rigid Google Doc of like how all of that looks, and it ends up sounding natural because you pre-produced it. And then post-production, yeah, when I started out, I was in college, and I and uh'd and liked my way through every episode. And I'd have to snip, because I was like, I need it to sound perfect. And I think it's a combination of getting better at speaking and being a little bit gentler with myself and saying, okay, some of this can stay because I do want it to sound like a conversation. I am not Radiolab. I am not rigidly editing every single breath, which I think is brilliant the way that they do it, but that's not what I'm doing.
It's not what I'm going to do.
You know, people, like we were saying, want to hear a conversation. They're not always here to hear a lecture. That's, finding your niche and producing around your niche, I think, is important.
Plus people, particularly with podcasting, people don't want perfection, they want humanity. That's why they're listening. And that's what podcasts can do, and particularly algorithms, yada yada, all that crap we're having to deal with. This is where for me, story is going to save the world, right? Because that's where we find our common ground. that's where, I may, if you hear somebody's story, you can't demonize them anymore. You may not like them, but you can't demonize them anymore, is at least my view. And so that's why this medium is so important, because it's very intimate, and you do have this ability to get a connection with the guest or the host, I think it's very powerful. It's very powerful.
Bob, I've seen in your videos that usually your video, in such cases, you lose out on them, or do you still maintain your workflows? Like you have in mind what's going to happen, or you just like...
It's a lot of what, frankly, I do is extemporaneous, and I'm listening to you three. I'm so impressed with the organization and project management and all of that, but I'll admit, a lot of my calendar's up in my head, and when I record my videos and when I do my podcast, I have to admit, there's not a lot of, maybe it shows, I hope not, a lot of rehearsal or choreography going on. I do think about it a lot, but I don't write down that many notes anymore. I can, on the spot, and I know anybody else here on this stage, and you guys could do the same, maybe to different degrees of quality, but I like to just dive right in. And I think that's more natural, that's more me. And you mentioned videos. Yeah, I try to record now on video all my podcasts, and I do a ton of videos as well. And again, I'm going to liken podcast content to any content that we put out there as marketers, as personal brands.
Interesting. And so when you have that heart and vulnerability in your conversations and in your podcast, I think people really respond to that.
The other thing that makes story interesting is conflict. It's got to make conflict. There's every successful TV show, film, movie, novel has conflict.
Stakes. What are the stakes?
I don't know if you guys know Grub Street Writers here in town. It's a fabulous organization. I've taken a bunch of courses there. Someone once said that a story without conflict is simply propaganda. And so if you're doing a podcast episode, where's the conflict? Where does this become interesting? And with a story, the story of boy meets girl has been told thousands and thousands of times. But what's that story? If it were boy meets girl, they get married. Boring. Propaganda.
I was going to say fights.
But if it's boy meets girl, they fall in love.
And no fights?
Then they start to have some fights, and then they break up, and then they go their separate ways, and they're thinking about each other, and then they come back together and they get married. That story's been told thousands of times, and can be told many, many more thousands of times because it has conflict. It's interesting. And so how can the stories that you tell have conflict and be interesting? And as you're doing your research, you talked about doing your research, where's the conflict? And when someone asks me, why'd you get fired? Oh, okay, we're going to jump right into conflict. Cool. That's good.
Begin with the end. Or go to the end with the end.
Let's move this conversation to our audience. Let's open the floor for questions if anyone has.
If you're starting out a podcast for a company versus for your personal, how important is it?
You can push it out right now, and you get noticed. And so many people say to me, you should trademark that name. You should patent that idea of newsjacking. And the answer is no, because as soon as you do, you put the brakes on anybody else talking about it. So how do you get something well known? You want other people to talk about it. So I purposely said, you can have at it. I made a chart, newsjacking chart. If you just Google it on Google Images, you'll see it. And I put a Creative Commons license on that. Creative Commons license is basically saying, depending on which license you choose, says, this is mine, but you may use it. You may even repurpose it as your own, as long as you give me the original credit. And so there's now like dozens and dozens and dozens of people who repurpose that chart in one way or another. And last time I checked, a couple of months ago, there was like 300,000 or 400,000 hits on Google for the word newsjacking. And it's in the Oxford English Dictionary.
Maybe it's an opportunity for them who people think of as, typical CEO and just trying to sell me something and little stiff, little too smooth. Maybe you have a CEO who's, little rough around the edges or lets his head down or her head down, as the expression goes.
Yeah.
And dig deep, let them be vulnerable, let them be themselves. Don't talk all about business.
Yeah, I think I'm nervous about the PR. It's like the CEO of Bank of America. I don't think he's going to talk about his pet dog, but yeah.
Probably not.
Probably, I would like to.
You never know.
So.
That's why you have to dig in deep with
Look up
research.
Jeff Taylor from Monster.com, and he has a new company called Boom Band or something like that. He's all over LinkedIn. That's the kind of CEO that would be a great host of a podcast.
He's been scared. Because who needs to hear about all the stuff he's won? I mean, but I had the opportunity to ask him, so because he was now singing with the Eagles, and I at one time asked him, so, hey, what's it like, playing with the Eagles? He went, well, I'm not scared anymore. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. I need to talk to this guy about why he's of that stature and still gets scared. And so it was a really interesting interview because it was all about the moments in his career where he was fearful and overcame that fear. I try to create a safe environment. I mean, they have to, when we're talking about trust, they have to trust that I'm a safe person and I'm going to be a good steward of their story and help them find that story. And it's really just about conversation. I ask a lot of questions. And I usually start with some kind of prompt because I just want you to say, tell me the story. And you're like, well, which one? Or how do I start? So you can guide them through the process. What I normally do is I show them a story that works.